Silksong is a massive game, and just like its predecessor Hollow Knight, there's so much to see and do. But what things stand out? Specifically, what are some of the smaller, less noticeable things that make the game better and worse? Hello everyone, my name is Frog19, and today I want to discuss some of the little things within Silksong that may go unnoticed or unthought of during your playthrough. Now, I already did a full breakdown and review of the game talking about some of the major flaws, so if that interests you, make sure to check it out after this video. But this time, I want to look deeper and point out some of the smaller aspects that I loved, that I didn't like, and some that I'm not so sure about. This video will be broken down, first talking about the good, then the bad, then everything that I don't think was done perfectly, but I'm open to changing my mind about through conversation in the comments. And did you know about YouTube's new secret hype feature? It's the best way to promote a video, so if you want to show some support, consider giving it some hype. I'd really appreciate it. Alright, starting with the good, and despite my complaining during some of the challenging parts of my playthrough, there certainly is a lot of good. First thing I want to mention is the movement system in Silksong. Holy smokes is this smooth. The second you unlock Sprint, the game opens up more than any single ability in Hollow Knight, and combined with the ledge grab mechanic, traversing the world feels incredible. And I love the danger that comes from sprinting, because you go so fast you'll oftentimes run into enemies, which leads to funny moments and learning opportunities. The next thing is cutscenes. Now Hollow Knight had some amazing cutscenes too, don't get me wrong, but Team Cherry absolutely kicked it up a notch for Silksong. You have this idea of the Citadel from the start, then once you enter it and you see its grandeur in the cutscene, my jaw literally dropped, it was so gorgeous. And don't get me started on the true ending final cutscene, which I won't show for spoilers, but it is by far the best cutscene in either of the games, and it's not even close. I also especially love that Team Cherry wasn't afraid to get scary and creepy with them, like the cutscene when you're treated for the curse. Also, the platforming in Silksong is so much better than Hollow Knight. Except for one aspect which I'll talk about later, but in general, the platforming is so challenging and satisfying, so as someone whose favorite aspect of these games is exploring, I found it a real treat to go through some of these platforming sections. Another thing is the NPCs in Silksong I think have much better stories. For example, Chakra's Master's Quest is sad and beautiful, the Green Prince's lore is heartbreaking, and of course, who can forget the true GOAT of Silksong, Sherma! I'm not even joking. When I saw Sherma went into White Ward, my heart dropped because I was so invested in her character. Now let's talk about the story of Silksong. I'm not going to go into the actual lore, but it's very refreshing to see a new story rather than one that just builds off of Hollow Knight. It's definitely connected, but totally separate, which I really appreciated. And not to mention that it's just a great story too. Now unfortunately, we have to talk about some of the things that aren't up to par and I think detract from my enjoyment of the game. One of the big things that I really missed in Silksong was the lack of a true home. And I don't mean a permanent house or something like that, as I understand the lore of Hornet not wanting to stay in Pharloom. But I mean there's no town that really feels alive. The closest thing to it would be Bellheart, but that's similar to Red Dead Redemption 1 in the sense that nothing really happens there. You just buy a house and then move on, and there's some shops, but mostly nothing happens. Dirtmouth from Hollow Knight, on the other hand, is much more like the camps from Red Dead Redemption 2, where things come and go. You can send NPCs there like Zote and Bretta, or the Grim Troop. It feels alive and ever-changing. Another thing I missed in Silksong was that there wasn't any purely fun bosses. Now, a lot of the bosses were really fun to fight, like First Sinner or Grandmother Silk or Lace, but none were designed with the absolute intention of being nothing but fun. Think of Gorb or Marmu in Hollow Knight. These bosses aren't just easy like Crystal Guardian, but they are fun and not meant to be anything but fun. The closest thing we get to this in Silksong would be Cogwork Dancers, but I feel like that's closer to Dung Defender in Hollow Knight, as it definitely poses a challenge while coincidentally having a fun moveset. I think the big bird boss in Act 3, or even Crust King, could have been purely fun had they not followed a gauntlet, or in the bird's case spawned regular enemies. It feels like they were designed to be purely fun, but then Team Cherry realized, wait, this is Act 3, they need to be hard. And did anyone else feel like a lot of the enemies in this game didn't really feel like they belonged in this universe? One of the things I loved about Hollow Knight was how every enemy was designed to be like a real-life bug, but many of them in Silksong clearly strayed away from this ideology. Like, what is this? Or these things, these aren't bugs. This one is straight up a teapot, although I have to admit, I absolutely love this guy despite not being a bug. He's one of my faves. Fetch quests are pretty common in every game nowadays, and I don't think developers should 100% omit them from games, as they do have some fans, but admittedly, in my opinion, I think there were far too many in Silksong. I see that they tried to make them more engaging by having you track or fight enemies in varying ways, but at the end of the day, they're still fetch quests, and I think they could have done something else for a large portion of them. And finally, I kind of felt like the tools and crest system in Silksong was a little limiting. I think it's so cool to have multiple movesets that you can choose from depending on the situation, and that each one has some special ability. That's fantastic, I love the crests, but I wasn't a fan of the tools. I think a better way they could have done it was to let you choose how many of each tool type to put onto a crest between some parameters. For example, my favorite crest is Wanderers, but it has 3 yellows. I think it would have been more engaging if every crest could have up to 2 of every tool slot, but a max of 4 for their respective proficiency. So Wanderer could have up to 4 yellows, up to 2 blues, and up to 2 reds, but only up to the normal 6 total tools. So you could choose to do the normal 3 yellow, 2 blue, 1 red, as it is in the game right now, or you could choose to do 2 yellow, 2 blue, 2 red, or maybe you want to use the Wanderer's yellow proficiency and use 4 yellows and 2 blues, for example. Now this is the part where I leave some debate up to you. These things I'll mention here aren't necessarily bad or good, but definitely noticeable to me, so I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Starting off with the music. Now the music in Silksong is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but personally I do prefer the music in HollowKnight, especially if you consider the DLC music, which obviously isn't fair at all, but hey, it's my video. And as I said before, I love the platforming in this game, so the fact that there isn't a White Palace equivalent is a bit of a shame. I mean, there's that section to get to the surface, but to be honest, I didn't find it all that difficult, so I'd love for a White Palace DLC in the future. And how do you feel about upgrading your needle in Silksong? Because I'm not so sure how I felt about the Pale Oil quests. I liked that the quests were more engaging than just finding them around in the world, but I also found them to be a little too tedious at times. Specifically the flea juggling record. And although the Courier's Rasher's quest admittedly is not that hard, I don't think it should have been used for a Pale Oil. But what do you think? I'm also curious what you guys think about shell shards. I understand that something needed to be added to balance tools, and that just lowering the damage or the quantity you carry could have potentially rendered them useless, but I do feel like the shell shards grind is a little much at times. Someone commented on my post for this video talking about how if you're primarily using tools in the Abyss and run out of shards, you either have to backtrack so far to get more, slowly grind in the Abyss, or change the way you want to play the game, which obviously isn't fun. Maybe they could have added more reliable ways to get shards in more scattered locations that would solve it, but farming for rosaries and buying shell shards doesn't work on the outskirts of the map. Now this one I debated straight up putting it into the bad category, but maybe it's not as bad as I originally thought, but I feel like there might be too many small requirements for reaching Act 3. For example, did you know you have to sell a relic to the Relic Seeker to access Act 3? That's actually absurd. Or that you need to find like a bazillion fleas? Okay, well maybe not a bazillion, but still. I wish there was a little more clarity within the game for reaching Act 3. Although, it does promote you to finish most of what you can before moving on. That's kind of why it's in the unsure category and not the bad. And lastly, I just want to say that I like the voice lines of NPCs in HollowKnight more, but maybe that's just because we've known them for longer, so they're more iconic, like the Bapanada or Sha! So what are some of the iconic lines in Silksong? Anyways, are there any little aspects of Silksong that you noticed in your playthrough that I didn't mention here? And what do you think of my opinions? Let me know in the comments, and remember to check out my review of the game where I focus more on the major flaws. But that's it for me, so make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, stay kind, take it easy, bye bye.